Welcome friends back to another r/prorevenge video. If you want to be an extra awesome person today, please make sure to hit that subscribe button. And our first story of the day is by Teddy Bear Dom 79, A Crappy Warehouse. So my life has been in the crapper for a while now, but a tiny bit of revenge can feel really good. It doesn't end what I'm going through, and is only a small chapter, but still. So with COVID going on, I was working some small jobs just to stay working. Namely, I was working at Walmart and also at Lowe's. Well, as things eased up a bit more, job opportunities opened up, and I interviewed for a warehouse manager at a company I'll call Neurotic Co. to protect the identity of those involved. I was immediately offered the job, though at a pay rate I thought was a joke for a manager. Still, it was much better than Walmart. They put me on an hourly rate of pay and gave me a 50-hour-a-week schedule to meet my minimum income expectations. The pay was insulting in some ways because of the range of things the owners wanted me to be able to do, including welding, plumbing, electrical, and carpentry, all on top of managing. The warehouse had gone through a short shutdown because of COVID and was ramping back up slowly. I managed a day crew of 2 that had been there forever, a night crew that at the moment had 1 person, and 4 drivers that had been there a while. My hours aligned mostly with the night crew as they needed the most help and the daytime guys could handle it well enough. So I managed at this warehouse for 8 months. That was all I could take. In that time, the owner slowly eroded my power. I watched him tell countless lies, change his mind on things at random, and change our working hours at the drop of a hat. He was a jerk. Also, the whole place was covered in cameras, and he would come in to talk to us about very specific things he had watched us do on camera while he was sitting at home. It was disturbing. Turnover was huge as the owner would simply piss people off and they would leave. It made my job impossible, but the other managers would tell me, "Hang in there, he'll be gone soon." Eventually, I had a crew that was loyal and worked for me. The only problem was if I was not in, they would call out to avoid working with the owner. Then finally it came. The owner was supposed to move to Florida to be near his grandson. His wife was making him. I think he wanted to just stick around and run the business into the ground. A couple days before he left, the owner took me aside and gave me a huge write-up for all sorts of dumb stuff that was untrue, and then yelled at me for an hour saying things like, "I bet you're sitting there thinking, how can this place make any money without me? Well, I was successful before you all by myself," and so forth. This of course was a lie. He'd been given the company by his father and it survived largely on loyalty from the customer base and a single product they were the exclusive distributor for in the region. As he left for Florida, he sent an email naming out the management team and excluding me. So I told the other managers I felt like I was being treated like a supervisor rather than a manager, and I would therefore act as a supervisor rather than a manager. I started looking for a new job. I planned to give a normal 2 weeks notice and leave peacefully. Then one night I had a funny feeling, and it made me take most of my personal stuff home for whatever reason. Had a lot of my own tools on my desk and such. The next morning, the stated management team took me into the office and fired me. The notice they gave me simply said, "You were terminated for insubordination," and they refused to cite an incident. To this day, I am convinced that the owner watched me take my personal tools home on camera from Florida and then called them and said fire him first thing. Then the revenge. On my drive home from being fired, my shift started 2 hours before my night workers. I called my workers one at a time and told them what happened, said I had enjoyed working with them, and if they ever need a reference, I'd be happy to help. I had a fantastic crew at this point, all good people despite hating the owner. A few hours later, the calls started coming in. The entire crew had called out for the night. I had a good giggle about it, but 2 days later, I started to get more calls. To the man, the entire warehouse night crew had quit in loyalty to me. I was told they'd been offered $4 an hour raises to stay, and all of them refused them. After my warehouse workers quit, I got a call from my favorite driver. I had mixed feelings on my drivers as a whole. He told me that none of the drivers had certifications for driving the trucks we had, air brakes, and suggested I report it to the Department of Transport. Let's just say that from what I heard, the owner had to come back from Florida at his wife's protest to take back over. The only people they could get for the night shift are a druggie who they fired previously when he got naked in the warehouse while high on LSD, and a guy who they previously fired for making far too many mistakes. Deliveries were truncated for some time because they could only use the van, instead of the 30-foot box trucks they have while the drivers got certified. Oh, and as I understand it, there was a hefty fine. It's really kind of funny how people will openly violate laws, be deceptive and conniving and shady relatively publicly, without realizing they're kind of making it really easy to take them down or concoct some form of revenge. If a company fired you kind of shadily like this, if a company, and especially one person who's a face of that company, was acting all shady and then fired you in an underhanded way like this, do you think you'd be spending some time to investigate ways that you might be able to get back at them? Or are you the kind of person that just moves on and wants to forget? Let me know in the comments down below. And our final story of the day is by Zarina Blue. Shady landlord loses his fancy truck and just about everything else. This is going to be very long, but considering I ruined the guy's life, not an exaggeration. Location, the Deep South, 2007 to 2008. My ex-husband and I have always gotten along very well, and we have at the time of the story a 7-year-old daughter. We've always lived near each other for convenience sake and have on occasion even lived in the same house after divorcing. So I was thrilled when the people across the street from him sold their place, and apparently it was going to be for rent. I'd known the folks across the street, nice people, and had even been in the house a time or two. So when I showed up with my other half to look the place over, I kinda knew what we would be getting. The landlord was working on the house when we pulled up. We'd gone out to eat before this, and so I know he was unaware. He was talking to someone who knew the people who'd lived there and been in the house. His big old dually was in the drive with his company name stenciled on it. He meets us in the garage and immediately starts lying. He told me this was his family home and he was fixing it up. But there were a lot of memories there, and his kids had grown up in that house. I realized he was adding value. I kept my mouth shut because it was right across the street from my ex-husband, and it was literally the bus stop for the school for my daughter. He continued to lie and I kinda tuned him out. The place was a little worse for wear, dirty, gross carpet, chipped paint. I made a comment on a broken light switch and he told me he was having a cleaning crew come through and clean up the place and having everything painted and the carpet redone. The price was a little high, but once again, I really wanted it and it wasn't nightmare high, just $200 over what I was expecting. I had a small Australian Shepherd, so first month rent, last month's rent, and pet deposit, $12.50 for each one. Ouch. So about 2 weeks later, it was move-in day. I should have known something was up when the key was left in a combo box on the door. We had paid through a service, so he had the money, and we had the key, and a mess. He had done literally nothing except replace a set of rotted outdoor steps that he probably had to for liability purposes. We dragged out the digital camera and started taking pictures. It was a 3-bedroom, 2-bath with a partial basement. We took over 1,100 pictures. Here were some highlights. Ketchup smeared on the kitchen walls and floor. Nothing in there had been cleaned. The fridge was awful. Had what smelled like hair gel rubbed into the dining room and outside the front bathroom door. Fireplace literally had soot covering all of it and up to the ceiling. The reason for all the non-working lights became apparent at the point he kept it dim for showings. Garage full of trash. Partial basement which we hadn't seen because that's where he had a big saw set up and wasn't really a selling point for us. Mold. All the mold. So I called him up and basically said, "What the heck?" And he replied that money and keys had already exchanged hands, and if I had a problem, I needed to put in a maintenance request. He said, "I don't remember it being that bad. Sounds like you made a mess moving in." Okay, so now I knew exactly how crappy of a person I'm dealing with. I put in a maintenance request about the mold. Went out and bought all the bleach, other cleaning supplies, and a carpet cleaner. I'm a military brat who lived in base housing. I knew how to clean, and we got to work. It took 2 days of 4 adults, my ex and a friend came over to help, to get the place passable. We even changed out the blinds. They were broken and dangerous. During this, landlord comes over to look at the mold, and I kid you not, grabs a roll of my paper towels and my bleach spray and starts wiping the mold off the walls. He had just walked into the garage, grabbed some cleaning stuff I had laid down in the garage, and I found him about halfway through his cleaning job. That's all he did. Fast forward 3 months, time for an inspection. Okay, he tells me he'll be there tomorrow at 8 a.m. He shows up at 6:30 p.m., demands to be let in. I let him in and he starts taking pictures of dishes in the sink, dinner was still on the table, and lecturing me about cleaning up when I cook. So in front of him, I pulled out my digital camera and took one of him taking a picture of dishes for dinner with dinner still on the table and a time date stamp. Jerk. He wanted to go through drawers in my bedroom. I laughed at him. Didn't hear from him again till move-out time. If you thought I was staying there longer than a year, then you're crazier than I was when I rented that place. He sent me a move-out checklist, professional steam cleaning and white glove clean of the entire house, new pine straw for landscaping, all rooms need to be repainted, wheat. When we moved in, the bathroom was literally turquoise, so we got to work, steam cleaned, white glove clean, etc., then took another 1,000 pictures. He walks through and is pissed. He even ran a white rag on top of the ceiling fan. He snatched the keys out of my hand and told me to expect to hear from him in 10 days about the deposit. That doesn't sound good. 2 weeks later, I get a bill for $3,750 for more professional steam cleaning, HVAC cleanout, and apparently we didn't use the right brand of wheat. Oh yes, we did. 2 things I hadn't disclosed. I have a bad habit of recording bad people, or just to cover your butt, and my mom is a landlord in the next state. She's the good kind who never was able to make money at it. If people told her they couldn't afford to pay her because they needed the money to feed their children, well, my mom usually gave them the money. So glad she got out. But my mom was very familiar with the laws and had looked a few things up about my landlord. So I grabbed my little recorder and called him. He owns a real estate business, his side is rental stuff, and his wife and grown daughters bought and sold houses. His oldest daughter picks up and she transfers me to him. It gets ugly fast and he tells me that I must have let my Australian Shepherd pee in the vent grates. What the heck? And that the way I take care of my daughter would be very interesting to CPS. He can help me work out a payment plan, but pretty soon we would be getting into collections territory. At one point, he actually says that all tenants are liars. Nice. About 20 minutes of being threatened. I call my mom back. To be honest, I'm pretty darn shook up. CPS? For what? So my mom tells me to pretend like I'm playing along and ask for an itemized receipt. Tell them your mom's going to cover it and tell them your mom needs it before turning over the money. I had one 10 minutes after I asked. On my end, the professional steam cleaner was a friend of mine who had a business and gave me a discount. HVAC was a scam. The company he listed belonged to his brother-in-law, was defunct, and out of another state. Since I had before, after, and his new listing pictures, I knew he hadn't hired anyone to do the HVAC cleaning. The vents were painted to the wall, and all the pics. We saved our paint receipts and I actually had pics of us painting. You can see the right brand and color clear as day. I called his business and told his daughter that I would be taking him to court. She obviously was unaware of what a crap her father was because when I told her, "No one threatens my little girl," she didn't know what I was talking about. So I put her on speakerphone and played a recording of her dad threatening to have CPS come visit if I didn't pay up, and she made it most of the way through before asking me to turn it off. And then she put me on hold to get her mom, his wife. She tries to reason with me, and I backed up the tape to the part where he talks about what happens to kids in the foster system and played it. She told me they would get back to me. They actually did. The mom and eldest called me on speakerphone and apologized. They told me how the business was divided and how they normally don't deal with rental stuff. I told them it was fine, but I was still taking him to court. Time for court. We ended up in arbitration. I showed up with 2 laptops for before and after, proof of his fake HVAC crap, a stack of literal receipts, him committing a crime by threatening to falsely call CPS, and a pretty good working knowledge of renter law in that state. At one point, the arbitrator asked me if I was a paralegal. He had a picture of dirty dishes and stories about how I lived like a pig. I pulled up the pic of the same sink of dishes with dinner in the foreground, time and date stamped. The arbitrator actually asked, "Did you expect her to do the dishes before she ate her dinner?" Even the woman taking notes for the arbitrator was grossed out when I showed them the ketchup and basement mold pics. Did you know that you can get 3 times what you ask for in a rental dispute depending on your state? Yeah, you can. I did. The arbitrator used the word appalling when describing the landlord's behavior. When I went out in the hallway afterwards, there was a young couple there asking the clerk if the landlord was available yet. Apparently, they were waiting for their turn at arbitration. I asked them if their case was HVAC related. Sure enough, it was. I pulled out all the paperwork I had about it and handed it to them with my number. I actually got several calls from his other tenants. He'd been running that scam a while, and these kids I handed the paper to had looked up every house on the landlord's website and went door to door warning them. Smart. I hadn't thought of that. Meanwhile, my mother was filing a complaint with everyone she could think of because he had his business listed as a suite, which turned out to be a P.O. box. Huge no-no. Your business must be a location that can be served by the courts. A year later, I saw a truck with his logo drive past. But it wasn't the dually, it was an older F-150, so I looked him up in the county clerk's records. Well, first, it seems he got divorced and cleaned out. The house, big truck, everything went to her. Then she sued him for the business. He got to keep the name, and she took everything else. I looked up the realty website using her maiden name to search. Her and the eldest daughter were using her maiden name and had a whole new web page and setup. Also, my mom got notice that her complaint was being addressed, and he had had his license suspended and a huge fine to get reinstated. My mom kept an eye on the records for home deeds in the area, and all but 2 of his properties were sold at auction. So, let's sum up. He had to pay me 3 times what I asked for, lost his big money-making scam, lost his wife, lost his houses, lost his truck, lost his license for a while. No regrets. From the moment OP said that they walked in and there were ketchup stains on the walls and mold in the basement, that was the moment I knew that this guy deserved whatever downfall was coming for him. It's one thing about fudging the condition of a place that you own and you're renting out. It's another to hide blatant stains, grime, mess, and mold from tenants before they sign on for a year-long lease. That's some of the trashiest stuff I've ever heard. Not to mention the other lies and the huge scam. This dude was as trashy as a person as his rental properties were in just general shape. But with that being said, that's all the time we have for today. So of all these stories I've read today, which is your favorite and why? Let me know in the comments down below. And if you haven't yet, if you could like and subscribe, that would mean a lot to me. Whatever you do, whether it's liking, subscribing, turning notifications on, all of it helps grow this channel, and I appreciate the heck out of it. So until next time, I'll see you all tomorrow with some more stories.